Okay, we've got a paired passage based on text. How would Graeber and Wengrow, text 2, most likely respond to the conventional wisdom presented in text 1? So text 2 responds to the conventional wisdom. Let's read what that is. So text 1, conventional wisdom long held that human social systems evolved in stages, beginning with hunter-gatherers forming small bands of members with roughly equal status. The shift to agriculture about 12,000 years ago sparked population growth that led to the emergence of groups with hierarchical structures, associations, clans, chiefdoms, and finally bureaucratic states. Agriculture in the last 10,000 plus years led to bigger cities, bigger states, and social structures, as opposed to the previous hunter-gatherers. Okay, so that's the conventional wisdom. Text 2. In a 2021 book, anthropologists Graeber and Wengrow, who we're talking about here, maintain that humans have always been socially flexible, alternately forming systems based on hierarchy and collective ones with decentralized leadership. So it says it really didn't progress over this time period as indicated in text 1. It's always been there, going back and forth between hierarchy and collectives depending on the needs, I guess. The authors point to evidence that as far back as 50,000 years ago, some hunter-gatherers adjusted their social structure seasonally, at times dispersing in small groups, but also assembling into communities that included esteemed individuals. So that would suggest a closer community with a hierarchy, and that existed 50,000 years ago. It just didn't crop up over time 12,000 years ago. So let's see what answer would suggest that. A, by conceding the importance of hierarchical systems, but asserting the greater significance of decentralized collective societies. No, it's not the importance of one versus the other. It is not a comparative. This is a false comparison. B, text 2 would talk about text 1 by disputing the idea that developments in social structures have followed a linear progression through distinct stages. Yes, text 2 is saying they've always had the different social structures. It just, varies depending on needs and times, and that went as far back as 50,000 years. So I think this is going to be our answer. It's not just a linear progression over time. C, by acknowledging that hierarchical roles likely weren't a part of social systems before the rise of agriculture. No, they say the exact opposite. There were roles of hierarchy. There were esteemed individuals in communities 50,000 years ago. So that's opposite of that. D, by challenging the assumption that groupings of hunter-gatherers were among the earliest forms of social structure. No, they pretty much admit hunter-gatherers existed back 50,000 years ago and beyond. So nobody's challenging that. That's not correct. B is the correct answer. Okay, we've got another paired passage. Which choice best describes how text 1 and text 2 relate to each other? Let's read text 1. The fossil record suggests that mammoths went extinct around 11,000 years ago. In a 2021 study of environmental DNA, genetic material shed in the environment by organisms in the Arctic, such and colleagues found mammoth eDNA in the sedimentary layers formed millennia later, around 4,000 years ago. Okay, so the fossil record suggests they went extinct 11,000 years ago, right? Way back when. And then this new study suggests, well, we're finding the eDNA in the sediment 4,000 years ago, suggesting they didn't go extinct until that point. To account for this discrepancy, such and such proposed the Arctic temperatures could preserve a mammoth carcass on the surface, allowing it to leach DNA into the environment for several thousand years. So perhaps it did die 11,000 years ago and it just leached DNA into the sediment for 7,000 years? Okay. Text 2. Wang colleagues concede that eDNA contains DNA from both living organisms and carcasses, but for DNA to leach from remains over several millennia requires that the remains be perpetually on the surface. Scavengers and weathering in the Arctic, however, are likely to break down surface remains well before 1,000 years have passed. They're saying, no way did it sit on the surface for 7,000 years. Even in the Arctic, it would have decayed over 1,000 years, right? It wouldn't have taken or existed for 7,000 years. So that's not quite right. So let's see what our answers are. Text 1 discusses two approaches to studying mammoth extinction without advocating for either, whereas text 2 advocates for one approach over the other. Two approaches for extinction, that is fossil records and the leaching of eDNA, without advocating for either, whereas text 2 advocates one approach over the other. It says basically the leaching wouldn't work. That's not advocating a second approach though, so I don't think that's quite right. Let's look at B. Text 1 presents findings by Wang colleagues and gives another research team's attempt to explain those findings. Okay, yep, this is another team's attempt to explain the findings. That's true. Whereas text 2 provides additional details that calls that explanation into question. Yes, that question of the leaching of the eDNA, text 2 is calling into question. It says they wouldn't be just sitting out there for 7,000 years on the surface. I think this is going to be the right answer. Let's check C and D. C, text 1 describes Wang colleagues' study and a critique of their methodology, whereas text 2 offers additional details showing that methodology to be sound. No, 2 says it's not sound. That's not correct. D, text 1 argues that new research has undermined the standard view of when mammoths went extinct, whereas text 2 suggests a way to reconcile the standard view. No, it's not a way to reconcile text 2. Text 2 simply says, not likely that they sat on the surface for over 1,000 years. That's wrong. B is the correct answer. Okay, looks like we have another paired passage. Based on the text, how Barenfield and colleagues, text 2, most likely respond to the conventional wisdom discussed in text 1. So what would text 2 say about conventional wisdom in text 1, which is underlined here? Okay, well, let's figure out what that conventional wisdom is. Text 1. Ecologists have long wondered how thousands of microscopic phytoplankton species can live together near ocean surfaces, competing for the same resources. So we get thousands of these species living near the surface on the oceans, and they're competing for the same things. According to conventional wisdom, one species should emerge after outcompeting the rest. So why do so many species remain? That's the question. Okay. Ecologists' many efforts to explain this phenomenon still haven't uncovered a satisfactory explanation. Okay. So text 1 says, okay, we've got these thousands of species. They're all together at the surface. They should be fighting each other until a lot of them go away, and I'm left with just a select few or one winner, right? That's conventional wisdom. Text 2. Ecologists so-and-so have connected phytoplankton's diversity to their microscopic size. Because these organisms are so tiny, they're spaced relatively far apart from each other in ocean water, and moreover, experience that water as a relatively dense substance. Okay, so what's going on here? They're basically saying, hey, they're on the surface of the ocean, these thousands of species, but they're so small, they're relatively far apart, so they don't interact and fight with each other. And the ocean itself is a medium that's hard for them to pass through, which means they can't easily close that gap. So the idea that they're all together fighting each other is not right. That's the wrong model, is what this seems to be saying, text 2. This in turn makes it hard for them to move around and interact with one another. Therefore, Barrington and so-and-so and team, direct competition among phytoplankton probably happens much less than previously thought. Okay, so what would text 2 say about the conventional wisdom? It's wrong. That's just an incorrect model. They're farther apart than you expect. They actually don't interact and fight very much at all. Let's see if we can find that answer. A, by arguing that it's based on a misconception about phytoplankton species competing with one another. Yeah, the conventional wisdom is based on a misconception that they're competing with each other, and they're really not. They're far apart. So I think A is going to be a pretty good answer. Let's check B, C, and D. By asserting that it fails to recognize that routine replenishment of ocean nutrients prevents competition. No, it has nothing to do with ocean nutrients. That's not it. B, or C, by suggesting that their own findings help clarify how phytoplankton species are able to compete with larger organisms. No, that's an incorrect comparison. Often we have these false comparatives as answers. There's nothing here about phytoplankton versus larger organisms. D, by recommending that more ecologists focus their research on how competition among phytoplankton species is increased with water density. Why does the increase of water density matter here? That is not the issue at all. D is not correct. A is the correct answer. Okay, looks like we've got another paired passage. Based on the text, how would the author of text 2 most likely respond to the researcher's perspective in text 1 on the behavior of magpies without trackers? So how are the magpies without trackers? What is a magpie? Dominique Potin and colleagues so-and-so captured 5 Australian magpies to test a new design for attaching tracking devices to birds. Okay, magpies are birds. There we go, Australian birds. As the researchers fitted each magpie with a tracker attached by a small harness, they noticed some magpies without trackers, the ones we're talking about here in the question condition, pecking at another magpie's tracker until it broke off. They broke the other magpie's trackers. The researchers suggested that this behavior could be evidence of magpies attempting to help another magpie without benefiting themselves. So are the magpies breaking the other trackers to help their friends out? Is that what's going on? Let's see what text 2 says about that. It can be tempting to think that animals are deliberately providing help when we see them removing trackers and other equipment from one another, especially when a species is known to exhibit other cooperative behaviors. Okay, so it's saying, yeah, it's normal to think they're helping each other. At the same time, it can be difficult to exclude the possibility that individuals are simply interested in the equipment because of its novelty. Or alternatively, another explanation is they just aren't used to seeing this, so they're pecking at it to see what the heck it is. Curiously pawing or pecking at it until it detaches, so eventually they break it, right? They're not trying to help the other magpies. They're essentially trying to, see what the heck these harnesses are. So how would text 2 respond to text 1 perspective? Say, no, you can't just easily conclude that they're out there to help their friends. That might not be what's going on at all. So let's see our answer choices. A, that behavior might have been due to the novelty of the magpie's captive setting rather than to the novelty of the tracker. Their captive setting? There's no discussion of the captivity of the setting. I don't think that's going to be a right answer. B, that behavior likely indicates the magpies were deliberately attempting to benefit themselves by obtaining the tracker. So would 2 say that they are looking to help out? No, that was the opposite idea. 2 suggested, wait a second, you can't conclude that. They might be actually just trying to find out what these trackers are. C, that behavior may not be evidence of selflessness. Yes, that's what text 2 said. Because not all the captured magpies demonstrated. Oh, well, no, that's not right. It's not because not all the captured magpies demonstrated it. That has nothing to do with the explanation of the behavior. Let's check D. That behavior might be adequately explained without suggesting that the magpies were attempting to assist the other magpie. Yes, there is an explanation that does not include magpies assisting the other. There's some other explanation. And that other explanation might be they attracted to the particular trackers. They've never seen them before. They're new, they're novel, they peck at them, and they're just curious. That's another possible explanation. D is going to be a correct answer.